Good afternoon, Professor Yaniv and all participants. Welcome to the 18th session of our internal week. My name is Winardi, and I am an accounting lecturer at the Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia, and I will be serving you as your moderator today. You will be hearing a lecture from Professor Yaniv Hanoch, but before we get started, I wanted to take a few minutes of your time to explain a brief profile from the speaker. Professor Yaniv is a professor in risk management at Southampton Business School. Prior to the joining Southampton Business School, he was a professor of Asian Science at Plymouth University and postdoc at the UCLA School of Public Health and the Max Planck Institute for Human Development. Professor Yaniv obtained his Ph.D. in 2004 from University of Haifa for his research on emotions and budget rationality. Now, moving along to our sessions, we will have 60 minutes of lecture and 30 minutes of Q&A with Professor Yaniv. Without further ado, please welcome Professor Yaniv, who will be speaking to us on topics responding to fraud solicitations, the role of critical thinking, and perceived benefit and risk.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Let me just ask a brief question to you. Is it possible to ask the audience for response, or is it like question, ask, and is there a mechanism for them to respond to if I have a question for them?
Sure, you can ask a question. Sure. The participant can answer via chat box, or they can answer using their microphones.
Okay. So first of all, feel free to raise any questions if you have throughout my presentation. It doesn't matter for me if we manage to complete all the studies that I want to present. I have too many studies probably for an hour. Let me see. I can see the room, the main room. How many of you, I mean, if you are happy to share it, it's always a very sensitive, know somebody who's or themselves have fallen victim to fraud, crypto fraud, any other financial fraud. Is anybody? I mean, you can either raise your. I can barely see, but if somebody can put it either in the chat or some raise their hands that they know somebody at least. You know, you don't have to say just about themselves. So Sophie, you raised your hand as in you know somebody or you fell victim to a scam?
Well, a couple of months ago, I was registered online about the crypto coin.
Okay. And you lost some money.
I was just trying to see what websites are for.
Okay.
No, I didn't lose any money. I left.
Okay, good.
I've done all the steps until the payment button. So I didn't make any payment. But after that, I received phone calls from all over the world.
Okay.
Keep persuading me. It's the right time to invest. And then I receive all those calls. I know it's fraud.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good. It's very good. Yeah.
The problem now I'm having is I keep receiving all those calls and I have no way to get rid of them.
Yes, thank you. There's a Nicholas. Nicholas, are you willing to share?
Yeah. Well, not exactly me, but kind of like my parents introduced me to something. And without their knowledge, it turns out that they were actually they actually got into like a fraud scheme, but like they handed it over to me. And in the end, a little bit of money, not still a devastating point, but like quite a bit was lost to I presume it's a pyramid scheme.
Thank you very much for sharing, Nicholas. And in the chat, there is somebody, at least two people, now three people that indicate that they have, they somehow fallen prey to fraud. And this is about the number of people that are willing to admit it, and in many cases, people are not willing to admit it. So my interest is really in trying to understand why some people fall prey to fraud, and possibly what we can do about it. This is a major, as we will see, this has a major financial issue. Some of you, this is just an example. Some of you might have received email like that, but the range and type of fraud is wide. You won 5 million or 20 million, or in this case, 12.5 million from Nigeria or something like that, and somebody wants to send it to you. Surprisingly, this kind of fraud has been around for over 100 years, and it seems to work. You might wonder, like, who the hell is responding to that? But quite a few individuals do respond to that. As one of you indicated, his parents, Nicola said, his parents transferred something to him that was a Ponzi scheme. It's very common. It hurts a lot of people, and it's really an issue that affects countries all over the globe. It doesn't matter if you're in Indonesia, if you're in the UK, or anything in between. This is just to indicate that there are many, many kinds of scam. I did not include here crypto scams, which has been proliferating in the last 2 years. Sophie just indicated now, she almost was a victim, and the aggressiveness that she's been pursued by scammers is another indicator. Some of the statistics indicate that about 1 out of 10 people fall prey to scam. From what we did, a small survey here, it's roughly the same, about 4 or 5 people indicated, and it's out of about 40 people in the room. So this number, so imagine, I think Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken, it has several 100 million people. Maybe you can tell me precisely the number. So just for the sake of discussion, if there are about 100 million, it's about 10 million people that has fallen prey to scam. It's by far the most common crime now in the world. 273. So thank you very much, Jilan. So imagine that now almost 30 million individuals in Indonesia have fallen prey to scam. In the UK, we are 60 million, so that's about 6 million. And this is to give you a sense of the financial magnitude. So the loss, the amount of money lost to this is an estimate because it's really hard to verify. This is lost for all types of scams against government, against individuals, against organizations. It's almost 5 billion pounds. It's over 5 trillion US dollars. I do not know the exchange currency with Indonesian money, but you can put it. It's extremely high. Just to put it in perspective, the U.S. Budget per year is less than that amount. It's about slightly less than 5 trillion a year. So it's enormous amount of money that is being lost every year to scam. During COVID, there's been an increase. Some indications are that fraud in the UK are to the point that it poses national security, and it really threat to the financial services. I've did a short Google. I put fraud in Indonesia this morning, and it's as prevalent. There are legal, economic, and social issues impacting Indonesia as much as it does other countries. It also, aside from the financial harms, people have physical harms. In a way, I'm not happy that Sophie revealed it, but I'm happy that Sophie was willing to reveal it. I'm not happy that Sophie is enduring that. But it shows the stress and also the emotional impact that it can have on individuals who've been victim. And in many cases, the emotional impact might be more severe than the financial impact. Most people who lose money to scams, it might be a few £100. It's not little, but it's not a life-changing necessary, but the emotional impact in many cases continues with them. Most scams are usually following basic principles of persuasion. They try to convince us to follow them. I'm sure Sophie can attest to that. They call her and said, look, you will make millions, please provide us with your information. And what they did is when Sophie put in her little information, thinking, now what can happen? I'm just checking the water. It's really a foot in the door tactics. In many cases, the scammers really want that information. So some people who check would just, you know what? I will just respond and see what happens. Because the moment you respond, many are placed on a sucker list. That list is being sold to scammers, and the next thing you know, like Sophie, you get hundreds of calls, letters, emails, etc. So there's a real danger there that by providing even the initial stages, what they do is they try to wear you down. And I hope Sophie should, or my recommendation for Sophie is to change her phone number and her email address, etc., just to try to avoid them. So what do we know? Are there certain personal characteristic or others that are associated with falling prey to scam? Lastly, we do not know so much about it. It's an area that the research on it just started in recent years. So we have some information, but not too much. So things that are associated with that is how proficient you are with numbers. We call it numeracy. So more numerate people tend to fall, at least to certain schemes, less. It is actually the opposite when it comes to crypto. Crypto schemes are typically the people that fall prey to crypto schemes are more educated, more savvy, more adventurous investors and people in IT rather than the common people. So this is might change. So one has to be careful about that. There's been a lot of discussion about how age is impacting falling prey. Somebody here mentioned their parents. I do not know precisely how old his parents are, but there's been quite a few studies looking at the impact of age on falling prey to scam. Being lonely, I tell all my students, if there's one thing you can do in the university is make friends. Make sure you're not. By the way, Sophie, do you have a question? I wasn't sure if you wanted to ask something. Oh, okay, sorry. Whether solicitation are cold or emotional, so hot and cold state. How risky you think it is? So sorry, Sophie, for using you as an example, but I always like to ask question and then use that whoever. So I apologize, and if you feel uncomfortable about it, just let me know. So at the beginning, I assume Sophie thought, okay, there's not a lot of risk in just exploring that. So she just put her information, saying, okay, what can happen? But now you can see what can happen, and probably she's regretting exploring, this crypto world, which happens to many. So how risky you think an option is, and how beneficial it is, another issue. You might remember the movie. Some of you might have seen the movie. How trustworthy is the institution? Many scammers capitalize that we trust. At least in the UK, the Revenue and Custom is a trustworthy organization, so you might get solicitation from there. Many scammers pretend to be entities that are trustworthy. Time pressure, and I'm sure some of you who've had encounter with scam, it's always act now. You have 2 minutes. If you don't do it now, you're gonna lose it, etc., etc. Or in cases, there are many scams that say, look, you did not pay your fine. The police is on the way to arrest you, etc. And there have been many cases like that. So they are using time pressure to impact the decision. And one thing that we've been interested in is analytical reasoning as a protective measure. So this is the background. Are there any questions about the background so far? Anything that I can elucidate or you might want to know more? Perfect. So let me show you now the kind of studies that we conducted to order to understand. All the studies that we did almost are with using two online platforms, MTurk and Prolific. Anybody who's interested in knowing more about this platform in order to collect data from participants, I'm happy to answer questions. So the first study, we had about 200, slightly over 200 adults. They saw these kinds of solicitation. You don't have to bother reading it. But this is taken from real solicitation that individuals receive in the United States. It's basically telling them that they've won something, in this case, 50,000, and all they have to do is call a number to verify them and obtain the price. So we manipulate whether let me just go back. So it could be from different kinds of company. You might be able to see that it says here Target, Walmart, and Costco. These are big names in the United States. Some of you might be familiar with this company, some of you might not. But these are trustworthy companies in the United States. So in some cases, we say that the company is known, and sometimes the company was not known, and in other cases, they had a deadline. You have to respond now, or there was no deadline. And what we ask them is how likely they are to contact the activation, how risky they thought the solicitation is, and how beneficial it is. We also included factors that we thought that might help explain some of the differences between individuals, such as subjective numeracy, loneliness scales, and demographic questions such as education, income, etc. Surprisingly, we didn't expect it to be so much. About half of the participants said that they will contact the number, but our manipulation did not work. It didn't matter whether it came from a known company or unknown company, whether they had a deadline or no deadline. And education was a variable that higher education were less likely to respond to that, but none of the other ones were significant. Importantly, the perceived risk and benefit played a major role in intention to respond. The more risky you think it is, the less likely you are to respond, and the more you think that there's benefit, the more likely you are to respond. This is not a huge surprise because we know from a range of studies that how people think about risks and benefits really drives many risky behavior. I can skip that. This is not that important. In the second study, we also introduced activation fees. We introduced that because many of these letters are actually asking for one. Not only do they scam you and they take your money later on, but they ask you to pay for it. So it's a double jeopardy. So you pay to be scammed. These scammers are as evil as it can be. As you can see, they either ask for 5 or 100 we asked. Again, we had the same kind of individuals. And even though there was an activation fee, quarter of our sample was willing to respond to that and pay, and in essence, pay either $5 or $100 to be scammed. But we can see that it is reduced. And obviously, the 5 had higher than the 100. So 100 individuals that saw 100 were less likely to respond than individuals that saw the 5. So basically, adding activation fee reduced compliance because it probably increased the risk perception. You say, what happens if I lose my $100, which is not a huge sum, but it can hurt people's pockets. I would not like to lose 100, for example. Again, risk and benefit played the same role as before, and education and age and education were important in our case against inversely. So the more education and the older you were, the less likely you were to respond. this is what the recommendation that is often given to individuals. Don't respond. But that's the problem. That's not the solution. That is the problem. Because the problem is that people responding to that. Telling people don't respond to that, it's not helpful. The question is, what can we do to do that? So it's easier said than done, and that's precisely the problem. It's not the solution. So we were also interested in whether what scammers are using what we call hot or cold scams. To give you an example, what it is, again, we had the same kind of sample. If you look at these two different solicitations, the one on the right has more color, has an image of individuals, it has a check on it, has the number 50,000, etc., making it really more emotional, more vivid, more realistic about, you can almost imagine and taste the 50,000. The one on the left is kind of colder. It has less pictures, it's less vivid, it's less emotion inducing. Scammers use both. So we were wondering about the impact of that. We also asked for need for cognition, which is basically asking individuals for how much information they would like, in a sense. Again, regardless of the solicitation, close to 40% of individuals indicated that they will contact the numbers. Need for cognition did not help. And again, risk and benefits were the driving force. Again, the more risky you think the option is or the solicitation is, the less likely you are to respond to that. The more beneficial you think it is, the more likely you are to respond to that. We said, okay, 50,000, maybe people are not so moved by 50,000, it might not change your life. So what about if it's 500,000? So we manipulated the prize money. We changed it from 50,000 to $500,000. And we also introduced again the activation fee, 0 and 100. We only used this time the emotionally laden solicitation. Again, close to 30% of individuals indicated that they will respond. It doesn't matter what is the amount of money, at least between 50 and 500,000. People respond in the same rate. Activation fee does impact, it does reduce. So in a sense, one way to think about it is ask individuals whether they would be, before responding, whether they would be willing to pay $100 or whatever currency you are working with in order to participate in that. So, in Sophie's case, we would have asked her, would you pay $100, whatever is the equivalent, in order to get into the crypto world? So you might have hesitated slightly more, thinking, do I really want to lose 100 just to get into the scheme? So, you might, this is the kind of thinking. We also had in another study, so this was the first line of study. We were really focusing here on young and adult. We wanted to compare it because the literature really speaks about age differences. And somebody mentioned, again, their parents. I do not know precisely how old is his parents. He might be in his early 20s, and his parents might be my age or even younger. I do not know. So when we think of old, we think of people that typically the literature speaks of individuals 65 and over, although that number is kind of arbitrary. In this case, we wanted to look at slightly different schemes. We didn't give them the schemes I showed you before, but here it was an investment scheme. So imagine getting into an investment that pays 2 to 3.4 daily interest rates of 2 to 3.4 per day. Obviously, there's no, even Warren Buffett cannot achieve such scheme. Just to translate it, this is about 700 to over 1,000% a year. I mean, it is possible here and there to probably some individual, but there's no guarantee to anybody. So the question is, would individuals buy into this really improbable scheme? So we had, and we asked them how appealing it is, how likely they are to participate, and again we ask about perceived benefit. In this case, we also included a wide range of additional measures such as susceptibility to scam. This is one scam, and all these other emotional, situational test of emotional understanding. We ask about their decision-making competency. Maybe the older adults were having cognitive difficulties. We ask about risk tolerance, financial literacy, susceptibility to persuasion, 2 different kinds of skills. So we really gave a wide range of skills in order to understand whether we can identify individuals and whether age different. So generally, with the 2 type of scams, the investment scam, we didn't find any connection between emotional ability, but we did find emotional ability and the questionnaire that asks about susceptibility to scam. Emotional ability, you can think about it as emotional intelligence. Some of you might have heard about the term emotional intelligence. It's been quite popularized in the last 10, 15 years, so you might have heard of it. If not, I'm happy to talk about it. Also, adult competency and financial literacy were not connected. They were connected, however, to this other measure of susceptibility to scam, and risk tolerance, that is how likely you are to tolerate risk, was correlated to scam 1, but not 2. So the picture is kind of complicated, I would say. Young individuals thought the schemes were more appealing than older adults. There were no real difference between the age and no real difference in how they thought about the risk and the benefit of the different scams. But likely to participate in investment scam 2 was more younger adults indicated higher likelihood, contrasting this literature showing that older adults are more likely to fall prey to scam. And as you can see, they rated it more beneficial and less risky, which can explain why. So young were more susceptible to this other measure, which is called GEM susceptibility to scam. Young adults were also more indicated more susceptibility to the Modic and Addison scales, which again, they are susceptibility to scale, but there were some other differences which are less important for our case, like financial risk tolerance. Again, risk and benefit are the main driving force. So Sophie, next time when you think about applying to something, do a cost-benefit analysis. What will be the benefit? What will be the cost? And if you think the risk is high, don't do it. So age was significant predictor for the second scam. Also risk tolerant and risk and benefit were again driving force. So this is one kind of scam. Are there any question, anything that you would like me to address before I continue to a different kind of scam? Okay, no questions. So the next kind of studies, we were interested in understanding what can prevent people, what are the factors that affect people falling prey to fake versus real websites. I do not know if you know, but there's some big issues with fake website pretending to be Amazon, or I do not know what are the, or banks or government entities in order to steal people's money and identities. So you can look at these two. The top one is a real one, and that comes from Amazon, and the bottom one is a fake one. Well, you can see that once I highlight, you can see quite easily maybe that it is fake. Actually, when you are searching and doing that in your daily routine, it's not a trivial task. It's quite easy to deceive individuals and to pretend that you are one rather than the other. So we were interested in understanding how what factors can help prevent that. So individuals were presented with 6 different real and fake websites. So this is Amazon. We had a bank, eBay, and a couple more that I don't remember. We also included a number of measure personality, self-control. That is how you think about acting now versus the future, gullibility, etc., etc. So we have a really wide. The most important was the top one, the analytical reasoning. It's called the cognitive reflection task. To give you an example, if in case you have not heard kind of question, imagine a ball and a bat, and the ball and the bat cost $1.10. The bat cost $1 more than the bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? So this will be the kind of question that will be in the cognitive reflection. So what we found is that in the first study is that higher level of analytical reasoning was a good predictor of your ability to discriminate, to tell which one is which. Even when we control for things like internet knowledge, gullibility, extroversion, and gender or sex of the individual. So really, analytical reasoning seemed like a promising way to go. So we said, okay, let's study it with older adults and see what happens. So we had, again, prolific. We had young and older adults in the sample, and again, higher level of analytical reasoning was associated with better discriminability. But younger did better than the older adults. So age predicted worse. So the older you were, the worse you did on this task. There might be a number of reasons why it is. So in study 3, we introduced study as reaction to the website. We thought, okay, maybe the way we phrase things impacted the way individuals, because they were prepared, because we told them that the study is about detecting fake and real. So in this study, we just told them that it's about decision making, and there was no impact. And also, it was a representative sample. So it's not really the samples that are an issue, and it's not our instruction to participant that impacted. What we did in study 4, we thought, okay, what about experts, IT experts? They should know everything, and maybe with them, it would not work. And indeed, we collected data from IT expert, almost, again, 300 people, and we gave them the same study. And as we predicted, analytical reasoning was not associated with better, because in most cases, they were able to detect what is real and what is fake, which is what you would expect from individuals working in IT, that they would be sensitive to the kind of cues that give you a sign. In study 5, we were interested in exploring how time pressure. So in many cases, and maybe Sophie experienced it as well, they tell you, act now, you have 5 minutes. If you don't do it now, you would lose the opportunity, you never know, etc. Do they use this technique of time pressure in you, Sophie?
Yes.
Thank you. So this is a common way for scammers to use, the police is on the way, you don't have time, run now, etc. So we said, okay, what about if we induce time pressure? And this is what you can see. The white bar is with no time pressure, and the sort of dark bar is with time pressure. You can see that it doesn't matter what age you are. Time pressure negatively impact individuals' capacity to discriminate between real and fake websites. So so that was study 5. In study 6, we were moving in the direction of thinking, okay, how we can actually improve accuracy. So we asked them either to do it as quickly as possible or as accurately as possible in solving the CRT. So it's just about the solving the CRT. It's not about looking at the website. But the idea is that once you do things as careful as possible, it will transfer also to the task of identifying website. So accuracy, asking people to be accurate versus fast, improve CRT performance, and that improved discriminability. So if you ask individuals to do something accurately, possibly slower, it impacted their capacity to solve these questions about cognitive reflection, which impacted their capacity to discriminate. For those of you who like to see a bit of real data, this is the way to think about it. Don't worry about the numbers there. I think that understanding the principle is all you need. We did it again with expert accuracy versus speed. And again, as predicted, it had no impact. Probably because there's a ceiling effect in the sense that regardless of how they do those tasks, IT people are so attuned to what is fake and real that not much can improve their scores. If you're at 100, you cannot get any better than 100. So it doesn't matter what you manipulate. In other words, it's just studying boundary condition to show that for some individuals, improving their cognitive reflection abilities has no impact. So we are actually 20 minutes before the end of the time. Let me sum up and sort of capture what I think we have, what I hope you learned today. So first, people are really willing to respond to fraud solicitation, being the most common crime in the world. This is also probably the only crime, not the only crime, one of the only crimes that the victims have to be active participants in the crime. So if you're being mugged, you've just been mugged. There's nothing you can do. If somebody breaks into your house, there's nothing you can do. In this case, you have to be active. You have to provide information. You have to send money. It's a completely different kinds of interaction between the perpetrator and the victim, which makes it a unique area to investigate why some people are doing that and why not, and what can be done to stop it. So the first, if people are willing to respond to those things, even when they have to pay money, which is interesting. I mean, scammers really like it because they get money twice. The other things to remember, as in many other areas of activities associated with risk, is that the perception, how people think about the risk and the benefit impacts them. But we have to remember that including activation fee does reduce it, especially the £100 or $100 in our case. I mean, it's my short interaction with Sophie, who's getting applause for me at least for her willingness to share and discuss some of these issues. You know, maybe if she had at the beginning think about, okay, would I be willing to pay $100 to put my information? Would I do that? Maybe it would have prevented some of this ordeal that she's going through. We also learned that it almost doesn't matter what the scammers do, people respond, whether it is hot or cold, the price amount, whether it's trustworthy or not. It really, people are just willing to respond for whatever reason. We also know that age, the assumption that older adults are more susceptible to scam, it's probably an inaccurate description of reality, because there's a complicated association between scam and age. Different scams respond or elicit or target different age group. Crypto is not for older adults so far. Doesn't mean that it won't be, but crypto is not many older adults fall for crypto scam, but they might fall for other kind of investments. There are different, for example, romance scam is targeted towards middle age, or a lot of it is towards middle age, and not neither old nor young. So it really depends. The link between age and scam is a complicated one. What we were able to demonstrate that really having a better or higher analytical reasoning improve your chances to prevent at least one kind of scam, which is associated with detecting false or real website. But as predicted, it makes no difference for experts. So if you are an expert in a field, in our case, in the field of IT, it does not help you, because you're probably at a ceiling. However, when it comes to financial investment, we know that more experienced investors tend to be more confident in their ability to detect what is fake and real, and thus are more likely to fall prey to certain kind of investment scam. So being an expert is not always a protective measure. As I mentioned, many scammers use time pressure, and it does work. And age was associated with reduced ability to discriminate, in our case, the fake website, possibly because they are not as savvy or familiar with some of the websites that we dealt with. I just like to thank all my collaborators that have done all the heavy work, and without them, this work have not been realized. Stacy, PG Lou, Patricia, Lucas, Emily, Nicholas, Anna, and Katrina, and Catherine. And that's it for today. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Yaniv. Now it's time for Q&A sessions. So I will give a chance for you to ask the questions. Okay, we have Raka. Okay, Raka, you can ask the
Yes, Raka.
Sir, did you or people around you have been scammed? And if so, what kind of scam and how was it resolved? And what did you learn from it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I personally have not been scammed, but I have friends or colleagues, etc., that members of their family have been scammed. The first thing I can tell you that is that it is only a question of time until I will be scammed. I think what I mean by that is that anybody can be scammed. People thinking, oh, I'm smart, I'm educated, I'm this, I'm that, and thinking that they, immune to that. It is false assumption. I think being aware of it, being diligent, and being cautious are the number one rules that I've learned about it, and that everybody can fall victim, even if you are very well educated, whether you're an expert, and that there's a real need for institution, governments, police, etc., schools, to educate and try to do their best to fight scammers.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Sir, oh, may I ask the
You
question?
can ask questions,
Mr.
but I cannot hear you.
Oh, do you
I can
me?
hear. I can
Oh.
hear you.
All right.
Okay. So I'm sorry, may I continue, Mr. Main Room? Mr. Rijadh. Okay, thank you. So maybe Mr. Yaniv, I'm just curious. For example, I forgot data, but I a little bit have reading a long time ago that more maybe the first question, do you agree that a senior member or older people is more susceptible, just for confirmation, more susceptible to fraud? That's my first question. And then the second question, it's correlated with the first question, which is, do you think that the older people means all older people, or it's just basically the boomer, sir? Basically, I mean, our the boomer era, and then for example, in our era, we are much more. The young people of our era is basically more knowledgeable in terms of digitalization than the previous older generation. So basically, they have so many information regarding what kind of scam, what kind of phishing attack, for example, like that. However, the boomer at the time, I'm sorry, I'm using boomer, I forgot the English.
It's okay. It's okay.
The older people doesn't really use email, for example. Like, I know that a long time ago there are many fraud using a telephone like that. But do you think that it's just the older people, it's just from in terms of the older generation, or if, for example, I grew old, even though I never been scammed, I'm not really, but even though I'm not susceptible, for example, not susceptible for fraud, do you think that in the future when I get older, for some reason, I get more susceptible for fraud? So that's my question, sir. Is it necessarily an era, or when we grow older, we can actually be more fragile? I think that's thank you.
Yeah. That's an excellent question, whether it is a cohort or it is something about the individuals that a lifespan transition. So are just everybody that is old enough. Now, as I mentioned before, I don't think that older adults as a cohort now are more susceptible necessarily. They don't fall prey to scam more often than people your age or people that are middle age. And that's what we're trying to understand. If there are individual differences that can predict whether people like you, Jovan,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, are more likely to fall to fraud now, or whether it is something that can change as you grow old. Some aspect of aging is associated with cognitive decline, and there might be that if you experience certain cognitive decline, that it might make you more susceptible to fraud. But it's not age per se, it's more the cognitive decline. The two are correlated to one another, but it's not the age per se, it's the changes that happen, sort of naturally as we age. So it is, and the kind of scams that people your generation or younger or slightly older are falling to are slightly different ones. So the scammers are targeting everyone, and they're targeting your cohort more and more, and they're targeting children, young children's more and more. So it's all across the lifespan. And it's not a problem that we can just think of, okay, it's just older adults, because then, the government and police and whatever neglects to make sure that people at different kind of age groups are also aware, are also taking protective measure, etc.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. It's give me an insight. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Jovan, for the questions. Is there any other questions? Okay, we have one question. I think, John, do you want to ask questions?
Okay. My question is, hello?
Yeah.
My question is this. My question is this. Is there any correlation between a person's vulnerability to scams, to online scams, in relation to their mental health state?
Yes, I got it. So that's an excellent question. And so if I understand you correctly, so like if somebody is in a state of stress or depression or different mental states that can possibly impact decision making, I can tell you that we've started to look at that, but it's a very, there's not enough data now to indicate. We suspect that a person's mental state and the state that they are in could impact their susceptibility, like depression, like being in a stressful situation, it's in an anxiety or stress, etc. So my prediction would be yes. We are only starting to look at it, so there's not enough data to support it. But my intuition would be that yes. Did that answer your question, John?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, John, for the questions. Any other questions, please, from the participants? We still have enough time.
Hello.
Hello.
May I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Okay. So I have two questions, but first is,
okay.
Are there any ways that countries can reduce the rates of sort of like scams being sent out to people? That's my first question. And my second question.
Let me answer one question at a time, because I think it's slightly easier. So yes, there has been, and there are ways. Many of the scams come through. I do not know what services you use in Indonesia, but through Google, for example. So Google is trying its best to prevent, but it's working with government, and governments are doing the best to identify scammers from around the world, because it's coming from everywhere. So from whether you are in Indonesia, the scammers can sit in any other country in the world. They don't have to be in Indonesia, or in the UK. They don't have to be. Most of them are coming from all over the world. So it's really up to the intelligence community, police, and different kinds of intelligence community to identify and to create blockade on the way for the scam. So for example, Google blocks daily millions of scam, millions of phishings that would have come to your email, but now do not come. And the government is working, I do not know precisely how and what they do, because it's, secrets that they hold, which is good, how they can, and in many cases, what the governments can do also is prosecute scammers. So they take scammers and they put them in jail. It has very little impact, but those are the kind of activities that can be. You might be using now maybe Microsoft. Is that correct on your laptop?
Yeah, I use Microsoft and Google. So.
Yeah. So Microsoft also has all sort of firewalls and mechanisms to try to prevent all sort of scams. But many scams, neither Google nor Microsoft can do much, because it's on the internet. their algorithm cannot detect it. But those are. And your second question?
Yep. So my second question is, I mean, it's kind of hit close to me. So, over the years, I think scams have been. I mean, I don't know for sure, but like I feel like scams have been evolving. People have been more creative with scams and stuff.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask, over the years, are we like in a riskier position of being scammed? Not only because scams have been evolving, but also the fact like a lot of our data is available online now. So like people could, yeah. I was just wondering.
Absolutely, because what they do, for example, when they call you, they have already harvested information from your Instagram, from your Facebook, from various other social media. So they can call you and say, "Hey, John, I know you have 2 kids. I know this. I know that," and they're using that in order to give authenticity and credibility to their scam, which they could not have done previously. Also, 30 years ago, there were very few internet scams. Now they are all over the place, and it's only going to increase. Their sophistication is only going to increase. The number of them is going to increase. This is what I meant by it's only a question of time until all of us probably fall prey to some scam. Banks fall prey to scam. Government fall prey to scams. University fall prey to scams. Google even fell prey to different kinds of scams. So it's really, really, really hard to prevent it, to be diligent all the time. You're on the phone, you get some text, you get this. In the UK during the pandemic, everybody ordered things online. And many boxes were coming. And you got all day messages on your phone from the delivery. The box is coming, the box is coming. And many scammers use fake messages. And people were clicking on because they thought that it's their delivery, it's illegitimate, etc. So they're using all sorts of mechanism in order to lure us and to scam us. So yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Rinaldi?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry for the inconvenience.
No
So
worries.
may I ask my question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so wait, I actually have my question written, but I'll read it out. So
Sure.
I was wondering, is there any like way to actually mitigate the scams that are beyond our capability of sensing it? Like maybe people can have a critical way of thinking, but there are example of scams that are taking a lot longer time to pull off, such as the one that I mentioned before, where my employee are scamming the family business. They did it by building trust for years and then learning about the weak spots and etc. etc. If you get what I mean.
Yeah. That's a really good question that I don't have a good answer because we cannot prevent 100% of the crime. So in some cases, like in your family business, somebody who works for years, who build trust, and then put their hands in the pocket and take the money and run, it's very hard to detect it. Most of the scams that I work on, it's a one-time transaction and quick. So there's really no time to build trust for a long period of time. There's not a long-term interaction. But those are really important domains that have not really been looked at because of their complexity and longevity. It's very hard for us to study something that lasts, let's say, 3 years. What are the mechanisms? Generally speaking, always being guarded is the thing to do. You cannot. So if the employee works in the company and he or she needs the key to open the I don't know, the store, there's not much you can do about it. You will give them the key and you would hope to trust them. I'm sorry that I don't have a very good response to that, because it's really complex, and there are very few answers that I know of. And I'm of course I'm sorry to hear that somebody managed to take money from your family, which hurts, which destroyed trust. Then the next employee, although he or she might not have done anything, they don't have the amount of trust that the first one had because of that. Yeah, they do damage not just for themselves, but for others as well.
Oh yes, okay, I understand, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rinaldi. Now it's Azra's turn to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the opportunity. I would like to ask the questions. The first one, what are the strategies from private or public stakeholders to promote the awareness regarding fraud and scams to the society which hasn't familiar to digital issues, for example, the elder ones or even the young ones?
Yeah, that's a very good question as well. But it depends probably on the country. So I do not know around the world what, for example, I have very little knowledge about what Indonesia is doing. I know in the UK, in the United States, and some other countries, there are specific organizations that are trying to promote knowledge among young or older adults. There are certain organizations that are delivering courses at schools or for the elderly. Newspapers are publishing warning about certain things. The police are doing announcement. So that I think also social media companies are posting things, alerting individuals that they might be to be aware of possible scams. So there are different mechanisms that are being involved. And I think that earlier we start actually working with individuals, so school, even primary school, educating them, alerting them, increasing their capacity with regard to numeracy or critical thinking, and other such mechanism might be a useful way forward.
Thank you, sir, for the answer. And maybe for my second question, will the future that is facilitated by excellent technological development, for example, like the implementation of AI, and then every properties are being digitalized, will increase fraud and scam issues? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so there are many people who are taking the AI approach to try to reduce scam. As I mentioned, Google is one excellent example who is one of the leaders in AI and are trying to identify the scam before they reach us, the consumers. And obviously they're doing an amazing job, but obviously it's not bulletproof because they've not managed to fight them all. And new scams comes all the way. So even if they identify one before, a new one would arrive. So for example, when COVID hit, there were many scams associated to COVID, which Google didn't necessarily know how to handle because it was a novelty. I know that AI is supposed to learn and to be robust enough to apply to other areas, but in reality, it was not able to detect and prevent some of these scams to come. Other comes via our phone, although my phone often tells me, beware, it might be a scam. In many cases, it doesn't tell me. So it is a good question. And one can think of it as one complementing the other. So the AI can prevent some, and the human can prevent some. So we're trying to bring these two together and say, okay, whatever people are doing with AI is perfectly fine, it's important, but often the weakest link is the individuals, and what can we do to understand and give tools to individuals not to click on the link, not to respond to them, etc.
Thank you for the answer, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So that's a question from Azra. Uh, is there any other questions, please? Adisti. All right, Adisti.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So,
Thank you.
I'm not really sure if this exists in the UK, but in Indonesia and its neighboring countries, I think there are many people that become victims of scam because they are hypnotized or being mind controlled by the scammers, which can happen directly or indirectly through phone calls. So my question is, do you think cultural characteristics play a role in the various types of scams that are prevalent in a particular country? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I do not know precisely on this example that you gave, but I have no doubt that cultural and national and factors like that impact the kind of scams and the techniques that are being used in different countries. So certain countries that might have, I don't know, might be religious, they might use religious things, or certain things that might be important, they might highlight in certain places. So there's no doubt that cultural factor, artifacts, symbols, information plays a role in how scammers are thinking in and designing their scam. So the scam might be, in some cases, might be the same, but they might adjust it to the local place, the local culture. Obviously, the language is different. So I've not, to be honest, I've not seen cross-cultural studies looking at fraud. This is something that is really called for, to look at difference, for example, between Indonesia and the UK. Are there any differences? There might be, obviously the language will be the same. I mean, people would not send a scam to UK individually in Indonesian, will be pointless. Nobody will understand that. But there might be cultural specific issues that are being used in order to solicit higher response. Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Thank you.
Okay. Is that all question from the participants? Oh, we still have one question from Nicholas.
Hi, Nicholas. Yeah. Go for it.
Nicholas in main room.
Okay.
Right.
Hello again.
Hi, Nicholas.
I have I'm not sure there's quite a definitive answer to this, but we're all being taught about how to avoid scams, right? The details and like the techniques they use. But what happens if you get caught into one? What do you do after that? Do you report it to the police? Do you take matters into your own hand? Nobody is really mentioning that part of the scamming process. So what is it? What's the process do you do after you get caught into a scam?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. That might also depend on the country. So I do not know what are the recommendation in Indonesia, but in the UK, please, it's highly recommended that you do report it. I highly recommend not to take things into your own hand. Typically, it can only escalate it and make things worse. Many scams are being conducted by organized crime. You do not want to mess with the organized crime. You do not want to upset them. I, generally speaking, going to the police or other authorities that are involved in that. In the UK, there's one additional authority, but going to the police and alerting them. In many cases, the police operates once there's a critical mass of complaints. So if one person complains about a certain crime, unless it's murder or something like that, they don't tend to do much. But if 1,000 people go and say, look, I've been scammed by this specific thing, they usually try and do something about it. So reporting to the police might not get your money back, but it might help prevent others from. And in some cases, you actually can get your money back. In the UK, there are some mechanisms that can help you get the money back, but it also depends on the kind of scam. So generally, that is another part of the problem, is that people don't report it. So the authorities don't know that there is a problem, and therefore they don't not doing anything. So it has a double kind of effect. So you fall prey to scam and you don't report it, so others fall prey to scam.
Okay, thanks for the answer, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right. So we have a new question in chat room. So from Maya. Maya, do you want to ask directly to Professor Yaniv? Okay, Maya asks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. According to fraud triangle theory, there are three components which leads fraudulent behavior, which is opportunity, pressure, and also rationalization. Although the fraud cases we hear about the most is happen in high-profile companies, but according to Action Fraud Police UK, SMEs are statistically more likely to suffer from fraud. Like 1 in 5 SMEs has been defrauded by an employee at some point in their trading history. My question is, how do you think to break fraud triangle in SMEs business? Thank you.
Yeah, that's. Thank you for the question, Maya. I think not Nicholas, but somebody else who spoke about his family. It's related to the question. What do you do with employees rather than with somebody that just their business is scam? So this is I do not know enough about that because I haven't done a lot of research about it. But it's far more complex and challenging to actually identify employee. I can tell you for a fact that governments are concerned about employees that cause fraud within the government, big companies and small companies. I think the small companies, they have less. The concern there is also their reduced ability to handle that. So small company or medium-sized companies have less financial backing that they can handle if employees steals. Sometimes if an employee steals certain amount of money, the company can go bankrupt. With larger organization, it's less likely to happen. But I really do not know the answer, what can be done. I apologize for that, but I've not specialized in this area. It's a very interesting, what can be done. How can you identify when you hire somebody, whether you can trust them or not, whether they're gonna steal your money or not? I wish I had some good answer for that because I think I would make millions helping companies do that. So thank you for the question, and I'm sorry that I don't have a really good answer. But it's a really important. It's a really important topic. It's one of your colleagues there, actually endured such a problem.
Yep. Thank you, Maya, for the questions. I don't see any questions from the participants. I'll give you a chance. I think this is the last chance for you to ask questions, Professor Yaniv. No, I think that's all, Professor Yaniv. So thank you very much, Professor Yaniv, for addressing this interesting topic.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, on behalf of IWEEK Organizing Committee, we'd like to say thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Hopefully next time face to face.
Yep, sure.
For the
So
session.
thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.